the thing I could not say, then came back to me this morning, folded inside an old coat pocket like it had been waiting for my hands to grow old enough to open it. My name is Hale. I am not a brave man when it comes to the truth, and my voice still feels strange when I let it carry anything soft. But you, Anna, you deserve to hear this from me now. While there is still breath in my chest and evening light left on the windows, there is a reason I have to tell you. Not because it will fix what I broke, not because it will return the years like birds flying backward through winter. I know time does not work that way. I have lived long enough to stop bargaining with it. But some words, when they remain unsaid too long, do not disappear. They settle inside the body. They become the ache in the hand before rain, the silence in a room after everyone is gone, the name you almost speak when waking from a dream. I found the coat in the upstairs closet behind boxes of old papers and a suitcase I had not touched since your mother died. Dust rose when I pulled it down. The house was cold, though the sun was already leaning through the glass. I stood there with that coat over my arm and felt foolishly like a younger man had stepped into the room and caught me pretending to be whole. The pocket held a note, only one page. My handwriting, blue ink, faded at the folds. I had written it for you when you were 19. I remember the night. Rain pressed against the roof like fingers. You had packed 2 bags and left them near the door, your face pale with the kind of courage that looks almost like fear. You were leaving for the city before dawn, and I stood in the kitchen making coffee neither of us wanted. The light above the stove hummed. Your mother had gone to bed, though I knew she was awake, listening. You waited for me to say something. I remember that most clearly. You stood by the sink, one hand on the strap of your bag, and you gave me all the mercy a daughter can give a father. You gave me time, you gave me silence. You gave me the chance to step across the little distance between us and become someone better. And I did not move. I told myself I was being strong. I told myself a father should not. I told myself love was understood if it had been paid for in roofs, school shoes, repairs, hospital bills, the long labor of keeping wolves away from the door. I had built a life with my hands. I had worked until my back bent and my hair went silver before I noticed. I thought provision was a language. But halfway through this morning, standing in that cold closet with the note trembling between my fingers, I finally admitted what I had avoided for 31 years. I was not being strong. I was afraid you would see how badly I needed you. That is the part I could not bear then. Not your leaving, not the city, not the empty chair at supper. It was the thought that if I opened my mouth, all the hunger in me would come out. I was afraid you would hear it and feel responsible for it. I was afraid my love would become a chain around your bright young life. So I swallowed it, and the swallowing became a habit. After you left, I walked through rooms that had grown too large. Your books were still stacked beside the window. A sweater hung behind your door, carrying the faint smell of soap and rain. I would pass it and stop only for a second, as if the house itself might confess that it missed you too. I wrote the note 3 nights later. I wrote that I was proud of you. I wrote that I was sorry for the coldness in me. I wrote that when you were born, I held you against my chest and felt something in my ruined heart begin again. I wrote that I loved you in a way that frightened me. Then I folded it, then I put it in my coat, then I never sent it. That is the shape of my cowardice, Anna. Not one great cruelty, not one shouted curse, but a small folded page left in the dark while life kept moving. I do not know what you will feel when you hear this. Maybe nothing. Maybe anger. Maybe that tired kindness you learned too early. I imagine you sitting across from me now, older than I still expect you to be. Your hands wrapped around a cup, your eyes searching my face for the father I should have been. Sometimes I let myself imagine a quieter future, a porch, 2 bars, 2 chairs. Your children, if they come running in the yard while the wind lifts the curtains behind us. Or no children at all. Only you and me learning how to speak without flinching. I imagine saying your name without regret pressing against it. But I am not asking you to forgive me here. Not yet. I am only opening the coat pocket at last. And somewhere inside this old house, the folded years have begun to breathe. The cost of my silence did not arrive all at once, Anna. It came quietly, one ordinary day after another, until the house had learned to live without your footsteps. My name is Daniel Hale. I had always believed a man could survive almost anything if he kept moving, but even now, saying that aloud, I feel the shame of how much I mistook motion for courage. And you, my girl, you were gone before I understood that the door closing behind you had not ended anything. It had only begun the part of my life I had not known how to enter. There is a reason I need to tell you this part too. because after you left, everyone said I adjusted a lot. Well, that is the phrase people use when they do not know where to place grief. They said it at the hardware store, at church, in the slow line at the bank. Daniel is doing fine. They told one another. Daniel keeps busy, and I did. I rose before dawn. I fixed gutters. I signed invoices. I replaced the cracked boards on the back steps. I drove the same roads with the radio low and the windows shut against the morning chill. I learned which traffic lights stayed red too long and which fields turned gold first in October. I became familiar with the sound of my own truck tires over gravel, but I was not fine. The kitchen. Told the truth first. Chairs stayed tucked beneath the table for weeks. Your mother moved it one morning while wiping crumbs from the cloth, and I looked at her as if she had done something cruel. She looked back at me with tired eyes, and I realized she had been waiting for me to notice what absence looked like when given a shape. After that, the hallway was too quiet. The bathroom mirror no longer fogged twice in the morning. No music came from your room, no drawer slammed, no voice called down the stairs asking whether I had seen a hairbrush, a scarf, and a book you had already packed. The house had not grown larger. I had grown smaller inside it. Your mother tried to talk about you. She would say your name while folding towels, gentle as placing a candle on a windowsill. Anna called today. Or Anna sounded tired. Or Anna said the city is colder than she expected. And I would nod. Sometimes I asked if you needed money. Sometimes I asked whether your apartment had heat. Sometimes I asked if the neighborhood was safe. I never asked if you missed us. I never asked if you were lonely. I never asked if you had forgiven me for standing in the kitchen like a locked door while, blessed with your leaving. There were nights when I almost called you myself. I would sit at the small desk by the window, phone in front of me, the room dim except for the lamp. Outside, the maple branches scratched lightly against the siding. Mother would already be asleep or pretending to be. I would place my hand on the receiver and imagine your voice. Hello? That one word frightened me more than any storm I had ever driven through. Because halfway through those years, though I did not have the honesty to name it then, I began to understand something I had buried beneath work and weather and stubborn pride. I had not only failed to tell you, I loved you. I had taught you not to expect it from me. That realization did not strike like lightning. It moved through me like winter entering a room under the door. Slow, uninvited, certain. I thought of your childhood then. Memory came in broken pieces. You at 6, holding up a drawing of our house with all the windows colored yellow. You at 10, standing in the yard after falling from your bicycle, trying not to cry because I had told you, brave girls get up. You at 14, singing softly upstairs when you thought no one could hear. You at 17, staring out the car window while I drove you home from school. Both of us pretending the distance between us was only silence. I loved you in all those moments. But love kept hidden can begin to resume difference. That is the sentence I have carried like a stone. Your mother knew it before I did. She once told me, while the kettle steamed between us, you think your heart is obvious because you can feel it. It isn't obvious to anyone else. I remember being angry when she said it, not loudly. I was rarely loud. My anger was colder than that. I went outside and split wood until my palms opened. The air smelled of wet bark and smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Each swing of the axe felt like an answer I did not know how to give. I think she was asking me to save what could still be saved. I did not know then how quickly chances grow old. Years passed. You came home for holidays, and each visit had the careful politeness of a guest returning to a place she once belonged. You brought flowers for your mother. You brought stories from work. You smiled at me across the table, and I asked about rent, your car, your health insurance, useful questions, fatherly questions, cowardly questions. I watched you become a woman from a distance, close enough to touch and too far to reach. Sometimes, after you drove away, I stood at the window until the road emptied. I imagined stopping you before the bend. I imagined walking out without my coat, the cold cutting through my shirt, calling your name with all the strength I had wasted on restraint. I imagined you turning back. I imagined stay a little longer, but the road stayed empty and my mouth stayed closed. I am not resolving this yet, Anna, because I had not reached the worst of it then. I had only begun to see the price. And outside that window, the years kept passing like headlights in the rain. I thought the worst sound in a house would be shouting, Anna, but I was wrong. The worst sound is a woman crying softly in another room because she has stopped believing you will win. My name is Daniel Hale. Even now, I feel my throat tighten around this part because there are memories a man keeps covered not out of reverence, but because he is ashamed of how clearly they still see him. And you, Anna, were not there that night, but everything about that night belonged to you too. There is a reason I cannot pass over it. Your mother had been sick longer than I admitted. Not sick enough at first for anyone to say the frightening words. Just tired, just pale, just resting more in the afternoons. She would stand by the kitchen counter with one hand pressed lightly against her side, and when I asked, she would smile. In that way, women smile when they have already learned men prefer comfort to truth. I told myself she was getting older. I told myself we both were. The mornings were colder that year. Frost held to the fence posts until nearly noon. The windows gathered a gray film, and the house smelled faintly of medicine, lemons, soap, and the wool blanket she kept over her knees. You called on Sundays. She made her voice bright for you. I could hear it change when she picked up the phone, as if she had opened a curtain inside herself. Yes, sweetheart, she would say, we're fine. We were not fine. I was building shelves in the garage the day she fell. That is the useless detail I remember. Pine boards, brass screws in a jar, my old radio playing a baseball game through static. I heard something drop inside the house, then a small sound, not even a cry, just breath leaving the body in the wrong way. I found her beside the table. For a moment, I did nothing. That is the part I hate most. I stood there with sawdust on my sleeves, looking at the woman who had spent her life translating my silence into something softer for you. And I froze like a boy caught stealing. Then I moved. I called for help. I held her hand. I said her name again and again, though she was already looking past me toward a place I could not see. At the hospital, the lights were too white. Everything smelled clean in a way that made death feel even nearer. A nurse asked questions. A doctor spoke carefully. I signed papers with a hand that seemed no longer attached to me. You arrived after midnight. I remember seeing you at the end of the corridor, coat half-buttoned, hair loose around your face, eyes wide with fear and travel. For 1 second, you looked 19 again. For 1 second, I saw the girl by the kitchen sink, waiting for me to become her father. You walked toward me. I stood up. And still, God help me, I did not know how to reach for you. You asked, is she going to die? There are moments when a life narrows to one question. everything I had earned, fixed, paid for, endured, all of it fell away before your face. I wanted to tell you the truth gently. I wanted to hold you before the answer arrived. I wanted to say, I am here and I am frightened too. Instead, I said, the doctors are doing what they can. I watched something close in your expression. It was small. Anyone else might have missed it. But I saw it. A door inside you shutting not because you wanted it shut, but because I had left you outside too many times. And sometime before dawn, sitting in that hard hospital chair while your mother slept under thin blankets, I finally admitted what I had spent my whole life refusing to face. I had not protected you from my pain. I had handed it to you without words and made you carry the shape of it. All those years, I believed silence was mercy. I thought I was sparing you the burden, my fear, my tenderness, my need. But silence is not empty. It fills itself with whatever the wounded heart imagines. You were a child, and then a young woman, and because I would not say what I felt, you had to guess. Maybe you guessed you were too much. Maybe you guessed you were not enough. Maybe you guessed love was something that stayed in the next room, busy with its hands, unable to look at you directly. Your mother died 3 days later. You sat on one side of her bed. I sat on the other. Outside the window, a bare tree moved in the wind, its branches scraping lightly against glass. Your mother's breathing had become uneven, each breath a small hill she had to climb. You held her hand and whispered things to her I could not hear. At the end, she opened her eyes. She looked at you first, then at me. And I knew with a certainty that has never left that she was asking me to do something I had failed to do all my life. Not speak loudly, not become another man, just step forward. After the funeral, people brought casseroles and folded chairs and soft voices. The house filled, then emptied. Flowers browned in vases. Your mother's shoes remained by the door for nearly a week because neither of us could move them. You stayed 3 nights. On the last morning, I found you in the kitchen before sunrise, wearing your coat, one hand on your suitcase. Again, the same room, the same waiting. Years had passed, but time had brought us back like a road circling a field. I imagine now another version of that morning. I imagine taking your suitcase from your hand. Not to keep you from leaving, but to delay the goodbye long enough for truth. I imagine us sitting at the table while the sky turns blue. I imagine telling you that your mother loved you beyond language, and that I did too, though my life had been a poor translation. But I did not say it then, not fully. You kissed my cheek and left. And the door closed with the sound of all the years I had not entered. What I could not say then began searching for you after your mother died, Anna, even when I was too stubborn to follow it. My name is Daniel Hale. I had become an old man in a house full of things that remembered better than I did, and admitting that still makes me feel smaller than I want to sound. But you, Anna, were somewhere beyond my windows, living days I could no longer picture. And I need you to know what happened in the silence after you left again. There is a reason this part must be told. After the funeral, the house changed its breathing. I do not know how else to say it. I do not know how else to say it. The rooms did not simply become quiet. They seemed to listen. The floorboards answered my steps with little complaints. The refrigerator hummed too loudly at night. The clock in the hallway, the one your mother wound every Sunday, kept ticking with a patience that felt almost cruel. I started sleeping in the chair by the front window, not every night at first, only when the bedroom felt too large, when the hollow beside me seemed less like a mattress and more like a question. I would sit with a blanket over my knees and watch the road until the glass reflected my own face back at me. Sometimes a car passed after midnight, headlights sliding across the walls, and for one foolish second, I would think it might be you. It never was. I found myself driving without purpose. Out past the grain elevators, along the county roads where the fields opened wide and empty. Past the school you had attended, past the church with the white steeples, past the little bridge where you once dropped your mitten into the creek and cried as if the world had ended. I remembered being impatient that day. I remembered telling you mittens could be replaced, but memory is merciless in old age. It does not return the grand moments first. It brings back the small ones, the almost forgotten places where love asked for gentleness and received instruction instead. I began stopping at the diner on Route 6 because it stayed open late. The waitress there, Marie, poured coffees without asking. She had silver hair and tired kindness in her hands. She never pried. That was why I kept going back. I would sit in the corner booth beneath the buzzing light and listen to strangers talk about weather, prices, doctors, grandchildren, ordinary things, human things. Sometimes I would take out my phone and scroll to your name, Anna. 4 letters, and still I could not press them. I told myself I did not want to disturb you. I told myself you had your own life. I told myself a daughter should not have to comfort her father. All true enough to hide behind, all false enough to ruin a man. Then one evening, rain came hard against the diner windows, turning the parking lot lamps into blurred yellow hollows. Marie refilled my cup and said, "You waiting on someone?" I almost said no. But something in me was tired of lying to strangers when I had spent a lifetime lying to myself. I said, "My daughter." The word felt strange in my mouth, not because it was untrue, but because I had spoken it with longing instead of information. Marie nodded, as if she understood more than I had offered. She know that? I looked down at my hands, and there, in that booth with rain on the glass and coffee going cold in front of me, I finally admitted what I had avoided since the day you were born. I had spent my life wanting to be needed, but I had been terrified of needing anyone back. That was the root beneath everything. Beneath the work, beneath the discipline, beneath the stiff nods and careful questions. I had mistaken dependence for weakness because somewhere long before you, life had taught me that needing people was how they learned where to hurt you. So I became useful. A useful man can be invited in without being known. A useful man can fix a sink, pay a bill at a graveside, stand at a graveside, carry boxes to a car. A useful man can remain loved at a safe distance. But a father cannot be only useful. A father has to be reachable. I was not. That night I drove home slowly. The wipers dragged across the windshield like a tired heartbeat. I passed dark houses with curtains drawn and imagined family behind them. A woman laughing in a kitchen. She had a child refusing sleep. Someone standing barefoot at a stove, stirring soup, while another person came up behind them and rested a hand on their back. Small touches, small mercies. I had built shelter, Anna, but I had not known how to live inside it. When I reached the house, I did not go in right away. I sat in the truck with the engine ticking down, watching rain run over the glass. For the first time, I let myself imagine calling you not because something was wrong, not because a bill needed discussing, not because death had forced us into the same room. Just because I missed you. I imagined your voice softening after the first guarded minute. I imagined you asking whether I had eaten. I imagined telling you the truth without turning it into a task for you to manage. I imagined the two of us standing on either side of the years unsure whether the bridge would hold. But I did not call that night. I only carried the ache inside and unlocked the front door. And in the dark hallway, the silence seemed to step aside as if something unseen had begun making room. The truth found me in a place I had entered only to escape it, Anna, and it spoke with your mother's voice. My name is Daniel Hale. I say that plainly because by then, my own name had started to feel like something written on old envelopes belonging to a man I was no longer certain I recognized. And you, my daughter, were farther from me than miles could measure, yet somehow everything I discovered that day led back to you. There is a reason I have to tell you what I found. It was late autumn, the kind of afternoon when the light looks thin and tired, as if the sun itself has begun remembering winter. I had gone into the attic looking for a box of tax records. That was the excuse. I liked excuses then. They made grief seem practical. They let me climb stairs, open drawers, sort paper, label things, and pretend I was not really searching for a voice that had gone quiet. The attic smelled of cedar, dust, and old heat. Rain tapped softly against the roof. Not hard rain, just enough to make the house feel surrounded. I pulled the chain on the bare bulb, and the room blinked awake around me. Christmas ornaments, folded quilts, your school projects wrapped in yellowing newspaper, a cradle I had once promised myself I would repair. I stood there too long looking at that cradle. You had slept in it as a newborn. Your mother used to place it by the bedroom window in the mornings because you loved the light. I would come home from work and find you there, fists curled near your cheeks, your breathing so small I used to lean close to make sure the world had not taken you back. I never told you that. There are so many small tendernesses I kept as if hoarding them made them safer. The box I needed was behind a stack of old blankets. When I moved them, a tin slid down and struck the floor. The sound cracked through the attic like a dropped plate. I knew the tin. Immediately, blue lid, dented corner. Your mother kept sewing needles in it when you were little. Only there were no needles inside. There were letters. Some were tied with ribbon, some were loose, some had my name on them, though I had never seen them before. My hands began to shake before I opened the first one, as if my body understood before my mind did. They were from your mother to me, not sent, not given, written and hidden. I sat on an old trunk beneath the bulb and read the first page while rain touched the roof above me. She had written it after you left for the city. Daniel, she wrote, "Our daughter waited for you tonight." That sentence nearly made me close the letter, but I kept reading. She wrote that you had watched the stairs before going to bed that last night, hoping I would come up and knock on your door. She wrote that you had told her, very quietly, he doesn't want me to go, but he doesn't want me to stay either. She wrote that she had wanted to correct you, wanted to say, your father loves you so much he cannot speak without breaking, but she had stopped herself because excuses were not the same as comfort. I read that line again and again. Excuses were not the same as comfort. Halfway through those letters, with the bulb humming above me and dust gathering on my sleeves, I finally understood something I had years circling but never entering. Your mother had not been the bridge between us. She had been the one standing in the river, holding up the pieces I refused to carry. Every birthday call she reminded me to make. Every holiday visit, she softened before it happened. Every hard look from you, she translated into patience. Every silence of mine, she wrapped in gentler cloth and handed to you as love, hoping one day I would learn to hand it myself. And when she died, the bridge did not simply collapse. It revealed how little I had built. I kept reading until the attic went dark around the edges. In one letter, she wrote about you at 16, crying in the laundry room because I had praised your report card by saying only to phonely, "Keep it up." In another, she wrote that you had asked whether I was disappointed in you. And she had told you no with such force, she frightened herself. Anna, I need you to understand what those pages did to me. They did not accuse me, that would have been easier. They loved me enough to show me the ruin plainly. I saw myself through her eyes then. Not as a villain, not as a good man misunderstood. Something harder. A man who loved deeply and failed because he kept expecting love to survive without being fed. I pressed the letters against my chest, and for the first times since your mother's funeral, I cried without trying to stop. The attic was cold. My knees hurt. The bulb swayed slightly in a draft I could not feel. Somewhere below, the house settled with a long wooden sigh. I remember thinking that maybe the dead do not leave us all at once. Maybe they hide what we need in the places we avoid until we are finally desperate enough to climb toward it. That evening, I brought the letters downstairs and placed them on the kitchen table. For a long while, I imagined you sitting across from me, reading them one by one. I imagined your face changing. Anger, first perhaps. Then grief. Then maybe the smallest that your mother had seen us both clearly and loved us anyway. I imagined, Ellington, I will stop letting other people translate my heart. But readiness is a fragile thing when it first appears. I did not call you that night either. I only sat beside those letters until the kitchen window turned black, and in the glass I saw an old man with his hands open at last. What I could not say then became impossible to hide once I saw myself clearly, Anna, and seeing myself was harder than losing almost anything else. My name is Daniel Hale. I have spent most of my life standing upright, but I confess to you now that there were days after those letters when I could barely remain in my own skin. And you, Anna, are the one person I should have faced long before I faced an empty kitchen table. There is a reason I must tell you what I did next. I began with the mirror. That sounds small, maybe even foolish, but I had avoided my own reflection for years without knowing it. I shaved by habit. I brushed my teeth while looking down into the sink. I passed the hallway glass as if it belonged to someone else. But after reading your mother's letters, I found myself standing before the bathroom mirror one cold morning, the light above it flickering slightly. And I looked, really looked. My face had become a record of delays, lines at the mouth from all the words held back, shadows under the eyes from sleep that never healed anything, a scar near my chin from an accident I remembered clearly because you had cried harder than I had, gray hair at my temples, loose skin at the throat, the face of a man who had kept going, yes, but not always toward the right things. I whispered your name, not loudly, barely enough to move the air. Anna. It startled me how young you sounded in that room. I began speaking to you when you were not there. In the morning, while making coffee, in the truck driving past fields silvered with frost. At night, when the house leaned into its old noises and the wind pressed against the windows. I would say the things I had never said, testing them like a man, learning to walk after years of pretending he had no legs. I love you. I missed you. I was proud and afraid. I should have come upstairs that night. The words sounded awkward at first. Too late, too naked. Sometimes I laughed once, bitterly, because what kind of father rehearses love alone in a dead woman's kitchen? But then the laughter would leave, and I would feel the weight of the silence waiting to return, and I would speak again. Your mother's letters stayed on the table for weeks. I did not put them away because putting things away had been my specialty. I had placed grief in drawers, tenderness in coat pockets, apologies in rooms no one entered. So I left them there beside the salt shaker and the small vase where she used to keep marigolds. Every morning they met me like witnesses. One afternoon, I found a photograph tucked between 2 pages. You were 7, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, one hand gripping my hair, the other pointing towards something beyond the frame. I looked tired into the picture, my shirt collar open, sun in my eyes. But I was smiling, not the polite smile people knew, a real one. I sat down hard when I saw it, because halfway through that afternoon, holding that photograph under the weak winter light, I finally admitted the truth. I had spent a lifetime disguising as character. I had not lost the ability to love openly. I had chosen not to risk it. That was the blade. It would have been easier to blame my father, who was harder than weather and gave affection, as if every kind word cost him blood. It would have been easier to blame work, poverty, the narrow years, the fear of becoming soft in a sorrowful tale that punished softness. All of that had shaped me. I will not pretend otherwise. But shaping is not the same as sentencing. At some point, Anna, I became the jailer of my own heart. And because you were close to me, you lived beside those bars. I went to the church the next Sunday, though I had not sat through a service since your mother's funeral. I arrived late and chose the back pew. The old wood was cold beneath my hands. Dust drifted in the colored light. People sang softly, and I could not remember half the words, but I stood because everyone else stood, and because sitting alone felt too much like refusing help again. I did not have a vision. No voice came down. But during the final prayer, I felt something loosens, not forgiveness exactly, not peace, but a small permission to stop defending the man who had hurt you. Afterward, I remained in the pew until the room emptied. The pastor, a young woman with kind eyes, asked if I needed anything. I almost said no. That old answer rose instantly, loyal as a dog. Instead, I said, I need to tell my daughter the truth. She nodded as if this were not strange at all. Maybe truth is less strange to people who have not spent their lives avoiding it. That evening, I took out paper, real paper. I could have called, I could have typed, but my hand needed to feel the labor of each sentence. I wrote slowly, stopping often. Outside, Dusk gathered in the yard, blue and cold. The first line took nearly an hour. Anna, I have been a coward with love. I imagined you receiving it. I imagined your hands stilling over the envelope. I imagined you reading it once, then folding it away because it hurt too much. I imagined you throwing it into and you calling me. I imagined you not calling. And still, for the first time, the fear did not decide for me. I placed the letter by the door beside my keys, where morning would have to find it. All night, the house waited with me. The words I could not say then finally left my house in a sealed envelopes, Anna, and I stood by the mailbox as if I had just buried or baptized part of myself. My name is Daniel Hale. I had written many practical letters in my life, but that morning my hand shook because this one carried the only thing I had ever been afraid to send. And you, Anna, were on the other side of town, or years, or pain. And I did not know whether my voice would reach you as love or arrive too late as noise. There is a reason I must tell you about the waiting. I mailed the letter before sunrise. The air was sharp enough to sting my lungs. Frost whitened the grass, and the road lay pale beneath a thin strip of morning. I remember the mailbox door making a small metal sound when I closed it, too ordinary for what it meant. No trumpet sounded, no angel's step from the field. A dog barked somewhere down the road, and my old coat smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Then I went back inside. That was all. After a lifetime of silence, the truth entered the world with a click of metal and a cold walk back to the porch. For the first hour, I felt almost light, not happy. Happiness would be the wrong word, but there was space in my chest where the secret had been. I made coffee and let it sit untouched. I opened the curtains in the kitchen. Sunlight came through weak and gold, touching the table, your mother's letters, the empty chair across from mine. I thought perhaps confession itself might be enough to change a man. By noon, I knew better. The fear returned slowly, like water finding cracks. What if you read it and felt only anger? What if my apology sounded like a man asking to be comforted for wounds he had caused? What if you had already built a life around my absence and my late tenderness arrived like someone knocking at a house no longer his? I checked the phone too often. Each time it remained dark, I told myself not to be foolish. Mail takes time, hearts take longer. I went outside and swept leaves from the back steps, though the wind kept putting them back. I tightened a loose hinge on the shed, I sorted screws in the garage. All the old rituals of usefulness came marching in, eager to rescue me from feeling, but they no longer worked the same way. Because now I knew what I was doing. That evening, while skies turned violet behind the bare trees, I sat in your mother's chair and read the letter again from memory, not the exact words. The truth beneath them. I had told you I was sorry. I had told you I loved you. I had told you I understood if you could not answer. I had told you that I was not writing to demand anything from you. And halfway through that first night of waiting, I admitted what I had avoided. Even while writing the letter, I still wanted something. I wanted you to come back toward me, not out of duty, not because I was old, not because grief had softened the distance. I wanted you to choose freely, to turn your face toward mine and see more than the man who had failed you. That wanting frightened me. For years, I had hidden behind the nobility of not asking. I told myself love should expect nothing. I told myself a father who had disappointed his daughter had no right to hope. But hope came anyway, small and stubborn, like a green shoot forcing itself through frozen ground. I hated it at first. Hope made me vulnerable in a way regret never had. Regret was familiar. Regret let me sit alone and pay for my sins in a private door opening. Hope asked me to risk hearing footsteps that might never come. 3 days passed, then 5. On the 6th morning, the phone rang while I was rinsing a cup at the sink. I nearly dropped it. Your name lit the screen, Anna. For a moment, I could not move. Water ran over my hands, warm and wasted. The ring filled the kitchen, each sound striking some hidden place in me. I thought of you at 19 by the sink. I thought of your mother in the hospital bed. I thought of the folded note in the coat pocket and the years it had slept in darkness. Then I answered. I said, hello? There was breathing on the other end, yours, unsteady, almost silent. Then you said, Dad, one word, not Daniel, not a polite hello, not the careful voice you used at holidays. Dad. I had not known a single word could take an old man apart so gently. I gripped the edge of the counter and closed my eyes. The kitchen seemed to tilt toward morning. Outside, a bird landed on the sill, its small feet tapping once against the glass before lifting away. You did not forgive me in that call. You did not say everything was all right. You cried, and then you were quiet, and then you said you had read the letter twice. I told I told you I was listening. I tried not to fill the silence. For once, I let it belong to you. Before we hung up, you said, I don't know what to do with all of this. And I said, neither do I. It was the first honest thing we shared without pretending it was enough. Now, when I imagine the future, I do not imagine it healed all at once. I imagine a table between us, 2 cups, long pauses, maybe your hand resting near mine, not touching yet. Maybe a window open and spring air moving through the room. Maybe your mother somewhere unseen, not fixing us, only witnessing. But I will not claim that future yet. I only know that after your call, the house did not feel empty in the same way. That night, beneath the quiet ticking of the hall clock, Hope stood barefoot at the door. I couldn't say it then, Anna. But when I saw her standing on my porch again, I knew the world had not finished with us. My name is Daniel Hale. I am an old man, and my knees hurt when the weather turns. But nothing in my body felt as unsteady as my heart did that afternoon. And you, standing there with your coat collar lifted against the wind, looked both like my daughter and like a stranger I had spent my life failing to know. There is a reason I need to end this part here. You had called 2 weeks before and said you might come by. Not that you would, not that you wanted to, only that you might. I held on to that word like a man holding a match in the dark. Might. For 14 days, I lived carefully. I cleaned the house, though there was hardly any dust. I washed the cups twice. I bought tea I remembered you drinking years ago, then stood in the store aisle wondering whether you still liked it. I changed the sheets in your old room and then stood in the doorway, ashamed of how much I wanted you to sleep under my roof again. Your room had become a storage place after you left. Boxes, old curtains, a lamp with no shade. I cleared it slowly. Beneath everything, the room still seemed to remember you, the faint mark on the wall where a poster had hung, the small dent in the windowsill from a candle you were not supposed to burn, the slant of afternoon light falling exactly where your desk once stood. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to imagine what you would see if you came upstairs. A room repaired too late, a father trying too hard, a house asking for something it had not earned. The day you arrived, the sky was low and bright, that strange winter brightness that makes every bare branch look drawn by hand. I had made coffee and forgotten to drink it. The clock ticked in the hall. My hands kept finding things to straighten. Then tires sounded on the road. I went to the window, then stepped back because I did not want you to see me watching. Even then, pride still had small roots in me. But when the knock came, gentle and uncertain, something in my chest answered before I moved. You stood there with your hands in your pockets, older, tired, beautiful in a way that hurt. For a second, neither of us spoke. The wind moved between us, cold enough to redden your cheeks. I wanted to say everything at once. I wanted to apologize again, to explain less, to ask whether you had eaten, whether you were happy, whether life had been kind to you when I had not known how to be. Instead, I said, come in out of the cold. It was not enough, but it was open. You stepped inside. The house seemed to hold its breath. We sat in the kitchen where all our unfinished moments had gathered, and over the years, I poured coffee for myself and tea for you. Your hands wrapped around the cup, and I noticed a thin scar near your thumb I did not remember. That small, unknown mark nearly broke me. A whole life had happened to you while I was learning to speak. At first, we talked carefully. Work, weather, the long drive, a neighbor who had moved away, your mother's roses that had somehow survived behind the house, safe things, small things, the kind of things people place between themselves when the deeper truth is too alive to touch directly. Then you looked toward the hallway and said, I used to think this house didn't want me. I closed my eyes. That was the moment, Anna. Not the letter. Not the phone call. Not even the sight of you on the porch. That was where I finally admitted what I had still been trying to soften. It was not enough that I loved you. A child should never have to become a detective to find her father's heart. I said that to you. My voice broke, Anna. You did not answer right away. You looked down into your tea, and I watched your breath move once slowly, as if you were choosing between leaving and staying. Then you said, I don't know how to be close to you. And I said, I don't know how yet either. There it was. Not healing. Not forgiveness tied with ribbon. Only truth sitting between us like a fragile cup neither of us wanted to drop. After a while, you asked if we could look at your mother's letters together. I brought them from the drawer where I had finally placed them. Not hidden, just kept. We read some in silence. Once you laughed through tears at something she had written about my terrible dancing. Once your fingers touched the edge of the page near mine, and neither of us pulled away quickly. Outside, evening gathered. The window over the sink turned blue. The road disappeared into shadow. The old house settled around us, no longer empty, not full, but listening. I do not know what comes next, Anna. I will not pretend destiny arrives like a door thrown open Maybe it comes more quietly. Maybe it comes as a daughter, staying 1 hour longer than she planned. Maybe it comes as an old man learning not to reach too fast. Maybe it comes as two people sitting in the ruins without calling them ruins anymore. I wanted to ask you to stay for supper. I almost did. But then you looked at me and said, maybe next time. And for the first time in years, next time sounded like a place we might both live long enough to reach. That evening, after you drove away, the porch light stayed on against the dark.